Okay, so Shabbat Shalom, family.
Shabbat Shalom.
How's everybody doing?
Great.
All right, so far I heard that we had a lot of great presentations. I heard that Uzi's was powerful, Minister Carnes did his thing. Frank, I was here to witness his excellent presentation. So I'm not here to top what they did. I'm just here to complement the information they already put out for you guys. So I'm going to go through this presentation real quick. Like I said, I threw it together while Frank was doing his presentation. Hopefully it's not sloppy, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. All right? Con? All right, so let's get through this. All right. So this is, I just threw a generic title, Black History Unplugged, presentation 2017. Right? Now, Frank left off at Deuteronomy 28:68, the curse of unemployment and captivity. I'm going to go through this real quick. I have a video actually on YouTube that you guys can go and check, where I did it here with the permission of Minister Carnes to actually go in depth in Deuteronomy 28:68 and break it down for you guys so you can understand that it's been mistranslated by the King James and some other translations, and unfortunately doctrines was built over it. I know I previously had a doctrine built over it coming into the truth until I actually learned more in depth about the Hebrew and I discovered the error in the translation. So I'm going to point that out real quick, and then we're going to move forward, okay? So Deuteronomy 28:68, it says, and shall bring. Now mind you, this is the interlinear, and this is the way that I actually go through the text. And anybody that's going to learn the language, when I first started off, I used interlinear, and it helped me pick up on the text, and then I learned more of the particulars of the language. So I'm going to read it the way it's rendered by the interlinear, because this is literally how it reads in the Hebrew. All right, it says, and shall bring the Most High to Egypt in ships, by the way whereof I spoke to you, never more again you shall see it, and you shall be sold. It says here, and you shall be sold, and that's error, we're going to correct it, there to your enemies as male and bondwomen, and no man shall buy. Now, the most important thing about this particular verse is not only where you're going to be brought to in regards to captivity, but once you get there, what is a curse that is going to follow you? So that way the children of Israel could be identified in these foreign lands. Now, if you can see, somebody read that for me at the top.
Curse of unemployment.
The curse of what? Unemployment in captivity. Now, what we're going to focus on here is the root word makar, which is mem, kaf, resh, makar. Makar literally means to sell something in the cow stem, which is the regular root stem, okay, verb stem, all right? But when we modify it, we have, and you shall be sold, is what they translated, but it's wrong, because we have what's called the hitpael stem. The hitpael stem is the reflective, all right? Reflective in the sense, and this is how I like to coin it, is when you are being the third party doing something to yourself. And you're gonna say, wow, that's interesting, how do you do that? In the word sold here, which is loosely translated as being sold, it should be rendered more particularly as an offer. And there you shall offer yourselves to your enemies. Because how can you be sold someplace to your enemies and no one buys you? That doesn't make any sense. Why would somebody create this middle passage, transatlantic slave trade system, bring you to someplace and nobody buys you? That's not a fruitful business at all. Con? So you go back and research it. It should say, and there you shall offer yourselves to your enemies as male bondmen and bondwomen, somebody that can be purchased with a price. When you go to a job and get employed, they have you for a price. They're paying for your time and servitude. Con? All right? And no one shall buy you. So that means we got taken someplace. And when we got there, we tried to offer ourselves as bondmen and bondwomen, people for hire, and no one was there to purchase us or to contract with us. Con? Now again, this is not speaking individually, but collectively as a nation or group of people. Con? And we're going to see. Let's move forward. All right? Well, I want to show you this real quick. This right here is the various Hebrew stems, kal, hifal, piel, puel, hifel, hofo, and hitpael. There's a couple more, but these are the main ones you'll find in the text. The one we need to focus on is the intensive reflective, which is prefixed by the hey, tab, and underneath the hey we have a hidik, and when we prefix it, normally you see underneath the top a shiva, which is two dots going up and down, and it's a zere that follows underneath the middle trilateral consonant, which is the mem in this case, and when you see the the Hirit, the Tav, the Shiva, and then you see the Zere underneath the second consonant, the trilateral root. This indicates you're dealing with an intensive reflective verb stem, which means you cannot say that it's in there, you shall be sold, because it would be another verb stem. But there, you shall offer yourself intensively in the reflective form, meaning that you are emphasizing offering or giving yourself to be someone for hire, and no one there wants to contract you. Let's move forward. Current validation of the curse. Somebody read this right here, loud.
One of the groups left behind is African Americans. Their unemployment rate, 8.8%, is more than double the rate for whites, 4.3%, and is actually closer to the 9% unemployment rates whites experienced in the depths of the recession. And for blacks, the rate actually went up last month.
And this was a recent article that I grabbed that gives us these statistics. And interestingly enough, what we witnessed, it says that our employment rate is so high that the only time it was equal to our Caucasian counterparts is when they hit a recession. Wow. And that stands as of today. So collectively as a nation of people, we are being adversely affected by these curses because of what our forefathers did, and it puts us in this dire strait where we're trying to offer ourselves for employment, but nobody wants to hire us. And one of the federal things that they do to disenfranchise you from getting a job, and the first thing is to arrest black men for petty things. You know why? Because when you go to fill out an application, it says, check here if you did if you have a misdemeanor. Check here if you did a felony. If so, why do you have it? And then they supply that, and all of a sudden they figure out, well, why am I not being hired? That's part of the prison industrial complex syndrome. And if you research that, you see why they do that specifically to target our people, especially the black man, to keep them unemployed and employed officially or legally. Then he chooses an illegal route to get money, and in that case, he becomes demonized and stereotyped by society, keeps him out of the home, and therefore the black woman has to raise the children by herself. And the black man feels inferior because, statistically speaking, the black woman is more educated on a level as far as academia than the black man is. So the purpose of it is to take the black man and just pretty much castrate him in any way possible, make him less than what he should feel as the king in his home and the leader in his community. Con? All right, let's move forward. And as you can see, some images of this, long unemployment line, signs saying they want to vote because they're trying to lobby to get jobs in their community, and it doesn't matter what president you put in there, this has always been consistent. We always outnumber every other ethnic group in regards to unemployment. Could it be a coincidence, or could it go back to the curses? But you know what? I don't deal with just curses. We have to deal with the solutions. You know why? If we follow Torah and become an entrepreneur, then guess what? We can enjoy this. Let's read it. Deuteronomy 28:2. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey, root word is Shema, the Most High, your Elohim. The Most High will send a blessing on your barns and on everything you put your hand to. The Most High, your Elohim, will bless you in the land he has given you. So even though you may be a result of captivity, if you turn towards the Torah, the solution is, if you become an entrepreneur, the Most High will bless everything you put your hands to. So, this doesn't mean that you're going to overthrow the curses, but you can enjoy a quality of life while awaiting your final redemption. Huh? Don't let anybody keep you stuck in just the curses, but don't give you a solution or an answer to it. Huh? Because if that's the case, then why even worship the Most High?
Come on now. Come on.
All right, let's move forward, all right? Open for business. All right? And if you need assistance in regards to starting your own business, you can keep a day job if you want, but also have hustles on the side to assist you as well in case something happens, huh? All right, let's move forward. All right? Hebrew Israelite migration routes from Israel to West Africa to America. So Israel is located here, and the Israelites had migrated in two routes, the Trans-Saharan route towards the top and the Sub-Saharan route towards the south, and they all emerged on West Africa, all right? So I just want you to look to see these routes, to see where they ended up, and then eventually they got taken from these areas in an admixture of other indigenous Africans that were there and brought over here to the Americas, because anyway there's an exodus in or out, whether it's by voluntary means or by a captor, there was always an admixture along with the Israelites. And the Most High extended the covenant to those people who wanted to cleave unto the Israelites. And we get that in Deuteronomy chapter 29, all right? So keep in mind, look at this. Look what I'm showing you here. This is important. Anybody know, let me see if I throw it up. Anybody know in this region right here, what area is this at in West Africa? Where 10 and 11 is at?
Like Ghana.
Okay, Ghana. Well, now remember, if you study maps and geography, you'll see that where Ghana is today was not the ancient Ghana. Okay, it was carved off, and it was a piece of it was chosen, and it was delegated to a European nation. So in this region, this would be Ghana of that time, but now modern day period, we're going to see what this area is and why that's important. Because now I'm showing you. She said it. All right, hold it now. I was hoping nobody got it, but she got it. But we're gonna get to it. Almost there, all right? So I just want you guys to see this and have it etched in your mind so you can see where I'm going at towards the end of this presentation. All right, let's move forward. Now, Hebrew Israelite Theophoric recorded in the transatlantic slave ship records. I know a lot of you may have seen this. If you haven't, this right here is showcasing that there are several Israelites, right? Who we call Israelites. Why? Because Theophoric. Does anybody know what a Theophoric is? Anybody?
Use your name.
You have Phori or Phoric and Theos or Theos.
Putting a deity in your name.
Say it again.
Putting your deity in your name.
Putting a deity in the name because that is supposed to invoke the blessings of that deity when you pronunciate the name. We see that in a lot of Hebrew names. Give me a Hebrew name, somebody. Isaiah, which is Yeshayah, which means what? Yah is my salvation. Right? So every time you say that name in Hebrew, it's supposed to invoke the attribute of the Creator for that blessing to fall upon your life. This is why naming children is important when it comes to our culture. Okay? But what I'm showing you here is that we have several Theophoric names from these individuals who were captured, right? And the intention was slavery, but a lot of these people ended up in Freetown. And as you can see here, we have the embarkment, where they were supposed to go, but a lot of these people ended up in Freetown. So I see a lot of Israelites use this screenshot, but they don't understand all the statistics here. And this is why I'm showing you that once they was picked up and intended for one location, they ended up in Freetown. And we're going to see why is Freetown significant.
I see Igbos too.
Oh, you see Igbos too? Oh! Yeah. So Igbos, in regards to their ethnic origins, people who have Theophoric names, where we can say or propose from our position that these were people who still had their cultural ties to their Israelite origin of the past, are now being picked up, have a particular embarkment area, but were dropped off from Freetown, and you see the arrival period right here from 1821 to 1825, and there's plenty more. I just got this screenshot for y'all. But we're going to see, once they were dropped off here, what happened? Because a lot of these people ended up in the Americas. But we're going to see, how does Freetown and these particular individuals have a connection to African Americans here in America today?
Come on now.
Let's move forward.
Come on.
Theophoric, as we said, refers to the practice of embedding in the name of a deity in usually a proper name. Example, Eliah, Yah is my Elohim. Yahusha, Yah is salvation. Michael, who is like El, all right? Sierra Leone, Freetown location. Sierra Leone is right here, and Freetown is right on the coast. So they was grabbing these slaves in their particular intended embarkment, and they wanted to go to a particular destination, but all of these ships and these slaves and whatever ended up here in Freetown before they were taken to other areas, and some of them actually stayed there in Freetown. But this is very significant when it comes to the Hebrew Israelites. I wonder why. Let's move forward. The Temne people. So how many of you heard of the Temne people, or the Temne tribe in West Africa? Raise your hand. 1, 2, okay. The Temne people, also called Temne, Timni, and Timani people, are a West African ethnic group. They are predominantly found in the northwestern and central parts of Sierra Leone, as well as the national capital, Freetown. Some Temne are also found in Guinea. The Temne constitute the largest ethnic group in Sierra Leone at 35% of the total population, which is slightly more than the Mende people at 31%. They speak the Temne, a male branch of the Niger-Congo languages. An article that I grabbed titled The Temne from Israel to Sierra Leone. There were Temne speakers along the coast in what is now Sierra Leone when the first Portuguese ships arrived in the 14th century. Portuguese, 14th century. Follow me. Temne were indicated as subsequent Portuguese maps, and references to them in brief vocabularies appear in the text. Trade began, albeit on a small scale, in the 15th century with the Portuguese, and expanded in the late 16th century with the arrival of British traders, and later traders of other nations. Slaves, gold, ivory, and local foodstuffs were exchanged for European trade goods, mostly cloth, firearms, and hardware. So this was the value of people. Interesting. That'll hit you one time. Temne traders had relationships with representatives at the permanent European factories in the river mouths. Similarly, they established trading relationships with the settlement at Freetown after it was founded in 1792. This settlement of free slaves from the Americas, inspired by philanthropic British abolitionists, was regarded ambivalently, by Temne traders. The freedmen developed a different culture, incorporating their traditions from lives in the American colonies in the Caribbean. They became known as Creoles after the language they developed. The Temne had long been involved in the profitable export of people for the slave trade, the natives. Typically taken as captives in warfare or from competing groups. During the early years, they sometimes raided where? Freetown. Trying to take back slaves. So when I showed you these ships dropping off slaves in Freetown, then all of a sudden you had these people here that was trying to grab those people that was there and actually take them into slavery or sell them into slavery. In the 19th century, following British abolition of the African slave trade, its crews often took liberated slaves from illegal ships to Freetown for resettlement, adding new African groups to the culture of the Creoles. Freetown became the primate trade empire on the coast. It attracted trade caravans from Temne and beyond. Creoles from Freetown moved progressively up country to trade in the second half of the 19th century. Their relations with the Temne and other indigenous ethnic groups in the country were not always amicable, as they had competing cultures. Now, pay attention to this. According to some oral traditions, the history of the Temne migration to a present-day Sierra Leone began in ancient Israel. From Israel, the Temne migrated to Ethiopia, from Ethiopia to the Mali Empire. After the Mali Empire, they migrated to Jalun Kandu Empire in the 11th and 12th centuries, mainly due to the fall of Jalun Kandu Empire and what later became the Fatah Jalon in the highlands of present-day Republic of Guinea. This is very important. If you go back and research everything I'm saying, you see that there was a migration of Israelites that were moving over there to Sierra Leone and Freetown. Why is this important? Not only did we have peoples that were taken from every other areas in Africa and brought and dropped off from Freetown, but you also have another influx of these people coming from the east and settling there in the west, amongst the other indigenous peoples that were there. I have something very special lined up for this, that I'm going to get you guys a lot of first-hand research on, primary research, to validate everything that's here. This is very interesting here. But I'm telling you this for a reason. Let's keep going, right? Let's run out of time. In the 1780s, the number of free slaves in London, listen to this, is growing. As a result of actions such as Sharpe's in the 1772 case of James Somerset. I want you guys to research this. A lot of people didn't know that there was free slaves in London that was going back to West Africa. How many of y'all knew that? Raise your hand. All right. The question is where they should best live and be employed. Sharpe's answers that they should settle in the continent from which they or their ancestors came. So now repatriation was being suggested by the abolitionists in London. And an attempt was also done here as well, and a lot of those people who were free blacks ended up where? Liberia. Do your research. You see some things kind of correlate. By agreement with the local chief of the Temne tribe, we're saying Temne again, known to the British as King Tom, you know how they just like to give English names, 20 miles of hilly coast are secured for the people, so they had land. The local king there said, sure, we'll take them back, and here's some land for them. How many of y'all knew that? Wow. It says they lie between the mouths of the two notorious slaving rivers, though. Yeah, you can come here in the areas where we're capturing slaves and selling them off. Okay, that's interesting, right? The Sierra Leone and the Sherbro. I mean, why would he not agree? I mean, think about it. If he's a king and you're saying you have these disenfranchised blacks from London who are free and you're bringing them here to settle in my country and prosper, but we don't get nothing from it? Oh yeah, put them where we're grabbing the slaves up. No problem, let them settle there. Think about that. Okay. Here they arrived from London in 1787, a Navy vessel carrying 331 free slaves, 41 of them women, and somewhat confusing the issue in philanthropic terms, 60 white London prostitutes were with them. What are these prostitutes doing with them? White prostitutes, white women prostitutes. Interesting. The experiment gets off to a disastrous start, obviously. Half the settlers died in the first year. Several of the free slaves opt for a prosperous new life, working for what? Local slave traders. And King Tom's successor, King Jemmy, attacks and burns the settlement in 1789. But is rebuilt on a new site and is given the name Freetown. A corner is turned with the arrival of 1,000. Okay, a corner is turned with the arrival of 1,000 free slaves from Nova Scotia and other black settlers from where?
Jamaica.
And with efficient administration from 1794 by a new governor, Zachary Malcolm. I want you guys to research this history because if you don't understand it, you're not going to know where I'm going at. Let's move forward. Right? Now, how are those peoples connected to us here? Sierra Leone Americans are Americans who are descended from Sierra Leoneans. The population of Sierra Leone Americans is relatively large and consists, according to surveys of 2013, of 21,538 people. However, many African Americans are descended also from Sierra Leone slaves who were exported to the United States since the what? 18th until when?
19th.
Century. That's interesting because a lot of the ones that we've seen from the slave voyages was from the early 19th century. So the number of people with that heritage should be much higher. So the number of slaves from present Sierra Leone exported to present United States exceeded the 25,000 people. But a peculiar group of people of partially Sierra Leonean descent in the United States is that of the
Gullah.
who descendants of slaves fled their owners at the end of the 18th and early 19th century, and they established in parts of South Carolina and Georgia and the Sea Islands, areas in which even today they retain their cultures. Moreover, according to American Community Survey, there are 34,161 Sierra Leonean immigrants living in the United States, and these people are distinct and separate from the slaves that got brought over here. Now let's move forward. Transatlantic slave trade, images and things were spoken about already for that. Let's move forward. But what I want to show you, I wanted to show you this video, but I don't have a lot of time, but pretty much in this video, there's a Hebrew Israelite brother who is speaking to a professor indigenous African professor from Liberia, and he's telling him the oral traditions about peoples from Israel who migrated over there to West Africa and settled in West Africa, and this professor is an anthropologist in Liberia, in indigenous cultural studies or something like that.
Wow.
So the oral tradition is being told by the griots to their people, and the professors in various areas in West Africa have studied this and they know this information. This video goes into depth about it. It's really only a 2-3 minute video. You can go back and check it out. If you want information on it, just let me know and I'll give you all the link. But this right here is confirmation about what I was saying to you about the migration routes from Israelites moving from Israel, settling in West Africa, and then the areas in West Africa that the slave traders picked them up and they dropped them off in Freetown, or some of them were left there in Freetown, some of them were liberated, but eventually they still got picked up and brought over here to Americas as slaves. And now we saw some people who were involved in slave trade from London coming over here conversion, and they're profiting off of these peoples that were there. And the Israelites, or the ones who claim to be from Israel, were at the lowest totem pole, which means they were the first ones to go. Okay, let's move forward. Why am I showing you all of this? The Gullah. The Seminole Gullah Geechee, modern day, what?
Maccabees.
So that's where they got the courage to fight from. Interesting. It's interesting. But I'm showing you this for a reason, so you can see what the spirit that was on these people, where it came from. Huh? All right. Black Seminoles. Gullahs who escaped from slavery. You can go get this article. It's called The Gullah Rice Slavery and Sierra Leone Connection, American Connection, by Joseph A. Opala. The Black Seminoles are a small offshoot of the Gullah who escaped from the rice plantations in where? South Carolina and Georgia. What state we in?
Georgia.
Okay. They built their own settlements on the Florida frontier, fought a series of wars to preserve their freedom, and were scattered across North America. They have played a significant role in American history, but have never received the recognition they deserve. Excuse me. Some of the Gullah managed to escape from coastal South Carolina and Georgia south into the Florida Peninsula. In the 18th century, Florida was a vast tropical wilderness covered with jungles and malaria-ridden swamps. The Spanish claimed Florida, but they used it only as a buffer between the British colonies and their own settled territories further south. They wanted to keep Florida as a dangerous wilderness frontier, so they offered a refuge to escaped slaves and renegade Indians from neighboring South Carolina and Georgia. The Gullahs were establishing their own free settlements in the Florida wilderness by at least the late 1700s. They built separate villages of thatched roof houses surrounded by fields of corn and swamp rice, and they maintained friendly relations with the mixed population of refugee Indians. In time, the two groups came to view themselves as part of the same loosely organized tribe in which blacks held important positions of leadership. Interesting. The Gullahs adopted Indian clothing while the Indians acquired a taste for rice and appreciation for Gullah music and folklore. But the Gullahs were physically more suited to tropical climate, and possessed an indispensable knowledge of tropical agriculture. I wonder why. And without their assistance, the Indians would not have been able to cope effectively with the Florida environment. Interesting. The two groups led an independent life in the wilderness of northern Florida, rearing several generations of children in freedom. And they recognized the American settlers and slave owners as their common enemy. Interesting. Same thing with the captivity the Greeks had on the Israelites back in the past. They took the yoke off their neck when they felt they were disrespected and enslaved because all the laws were changing and the iron hand or fist was coming upon the ancient Israelites during the Hasmonean dynasty period right after that. Interesting, right?
That's right.
So it says here, and the Americans called the Florida Indians Seminoles from the Spanish word Cimarron, which means wild or untamed, and they called the runaway Gullahs Seminole Negroes or Indian Negroes. Modern historians have called these free Gullah frontiersmen the Black Seminoles. The Seminole settlements in Spanish Florida increased as more and more runaway slaves and renegade Indians escaped south. So once this settlement was established, more and more people heard about it and they started rushing towards this environment. And conflict with the Americans was sooner or later inevitable. Why? Well, if you got a nation that's running strictly off of slavery and they're hearing that all of these blacks are going to a colony that was owned by the Spanish and being protected, and they have their own establishment and settlement, and the Indians are working alongside them, they can influence the slaves north of them to revolt and come escape to Florida and use that as a fort of some sort to fight against the Americans towards the north, the white Americans towards the north. This spelled danger for American, for the American establishment. So something had to be done about that. But let's see, we're going to read a little bit of this. It says, there were skirmishes in 1812 and 1816. In 1818, General Andrew Jackson, how many of y'all know who Andrew Jackson is?
Stonewall Jackson.
Led an American army into Florida to claim it for the United States, and war finally erupted. The blacks and Indians fought side by side in a desperate struggle to stop the American advance, but they were defeated and driven south into the more remote wilderness of central and southern Florida. How many of y'all learned this in school? Exactly, right? General Jackson, later president, referred to the First Seminole War as an Indian and Negro War. Publicly, he said this is an Indian-Negro War. But a lot of us don't even know about that. And they don't teach you this in history books. 1835, the Second Seminole War broke out, and this full-scale guerrilla war would last for 6 years. Now they fighting against the American army for 6 years. Held them off. But they don't teach you this in school. Okay. This 6 years, and claimed the lives of 1,500 American soldiers. So many soldiers they killed. Okay? The Black Seminoles waged the fiercest resistance as they feared that capture or surrender meant death or return to slavery, and they were more adept at living and fighting in the jungles than their Indian comrades. So the Indians that were there were dependent upon the slaves because they were used to fighting in the jungles. I wonder where they got that from. Interesting. That's how you know we wasn't native here, but when we get to an area that we have social memory that's epigenetically imposed upon us on how to survive in that environment, once we're in our native arena, then we can fight a battle, we can fight a war, we can sustain that battle, okay? Let me see. Then the American commander, General Jessup, informed the War Department that this, you may be assured, is a Negro and not an Indian war. So now they realize it ain't the Indians that's really putting this work on us, it's these Negroes. And if you learn how those Negroes was killing these white soldiers, guerrilla warfare, hand-to-hand combat, knives, close quarters combat, how they was killing them, severing their heads, breaking their necks, using anything in the environment to kill off these soldiers. They fought a very grueling battle, but yet we're not taught this in history. Interesting. It says, and a U.S. congressman of the period commented that these black fighters were contending against the whole military power of the United States. What? And then you wonder why, when the black nationalists rose up in the 60s and 70s, why they was getting scared. They was remembering history. Oh, we can't have another Gullah revolt. These black nationalists now, they're not just centralized in one area, they're popping up all over the place. COINTELPRO, take them out. Okay. When the army finally captured the black Seminoles, officers refused to return them to slavery, fearing that these seasoned warriors, accustomed to their freedom, would wreak havoc on the southern plantations. So they didn't even want to put them back into slavery because they would teach the slaves how to rise up. It says in 1842, the army forcibly removed them along with their Indian comrades to Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, in the unsettled West. The black Seminoles, exiled from their Florida strongholds, were forced to continue their struggle for freedom on the western frontier. In Oklahoma, the government put them under the authority of the Creek Indians, slave owners who tried to curb their freedom, and white slave traders came at night to kidnap their women and children. In 1850, a group of black Seminoles and Seminole Indians escaped south across Texas to the desert badlands of northern Mexico. They established a free settlement and, as in Florida, began to attract runaway slaves from across the border. In 1855, a heavily armed band of Texas Rangers rode into Mexico to destroy the Seminole settlement, but the blacks and Indians stopped them and forced them back into the U.S. The Indians soon returned to Oklahoma, but the black Seminoles remained in Mexico, fighting constantly to protect their settlement from marauding Comanche and Apache Indians. So not only did the Seminoles fight against the U.S. Army, they was also fighting against these other Indians who would try to slay them as well. Okay. In 1870, after emancipation of slaves in the United States, the U.S. Cavalry in southern Texas invited some of the black Seminoles to return and join the army. And it officially established the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. How many of you heard about them? Okay. In 1875, 3 of the scouts won the Congressional Medal of Honor. How many of you knew that? Okay. America's highest military decoration in a single engagement with the Comanche Indians on the Pescos River. The black Seminoles had fled the rice plantations, built their own free settlements in the Florida wilderness, and then fought almost continuously for 50 years to preserve their freedom. It is little wonder they should provide some of the finest soldiers in the U.S. Cavalry. So, the soldiers that helped turn the tides of war were not the soldiers we're talking about seeing in these movies. It was these black Seminoles. But they don't tell you about this. You know how empowering this is? If you was a teacher to children in school, instead of saying, well, when your ancestors got here, they were just slaves. And while they was here, they were slaves the whole time until we set them free. Just don't tell you this history. Can't tell you this history. Okay. All right, how much time I got left? Like 2 minutes? All right, let me just run through this real quick. Today, there are still small black Seminole communities scattered by war across North America and the West Indies. Excuse me. The black Indians live on the Andros Islands in the Bahamas, where their ancestors escaped from Florida after the first Seminole War. So when the first war went down, some of them left and they went to the Bahamas and they stayed in the Bahamas. The Seminole Freedmen, the largest group, live in rural Seminole County, Oklahoma, where they are still official members of the Seminole Indian Nation. The Mascagos dwell in the dusty desert town of Nacimiento in the state of Coahuila in northern Mexico. And finally, the Scouts live in Bracketville, Texas, outside the walls of the old fort where their grandfathers served in the U.S. Cavalry. These groups have lost almost all contact with one another, but they have all retained the memory of their ancestors' gallant fight for freedom in the Florida wilderness. So this is a social memory that was continuously passed down. In 1878, Dr. Ian Hancock discovered that elders among the Texas Scouts still speak a dialect of Gullah, 140 years after their ancestors were exiled from Florida and as much as 200 years after their early ancestors escaped from rice plantations in South Carolina and Georgia. In 1980, this writer found that elderly people among the Oklahoma Seminole Freedmen also spoke Gullah, while many younger people remember words and phrases once used by their grandparents. Both the Oklahoma and Texas groups, though deeply conscious of their Florida heritage, were unaware of their connection with the Gullah in South Carolina and Georgia. So they're in separate parts, but they have the same social memory, and when a person went to go research it, they seen it had so many similarities that they all came from a common source, all right? Were unaware of their connection with Gullah. They did not know precisely where the slave ancestors had come from before fleeing into the Florida wilderness. So a lot of the people in those groups who exist today, they didn't have recollection of where their origin came from, but they kept the cultures and the customs, all right, that we read earlier. The Oklahoma Seminole Freedmen still possess a rich traditional culture combining both African and American Indian elements. They continue to eat rice as a characteristic part of their diet, sometimes applying a sauce of okra and spinach leaves like the Gullah and like their distant relatives in West Africa. So, done with the presentation, but the summary is this. If we look at the historical record, a lot of times we're not shown a lot of this stuff. We're not even taught a lot of this stuff. What I want to show you is there are oral traditions amongst some of the Temne people in West Africa, more particularly in Sierra Leone, who speak of having a migrational origin from Israel and commuting and travel all the way somewhere in West Africa. There was a whole history that was occurring that I showed you as far as the freedmen from London all coming to capitalize on the slave trade, and the indigenous Temne chiefsmen or tribesmen who were there, who were selling the lower class into slavery, right? Which would have been the Israelites if they settled there, because they would have been at the lower rung of society, and they would have been the first ones to go, and then after that, prisoners of war, regular prisoners, etc. But our people, if they did settle there, according to the oral tradition, would have been the first ones to go be sold into slavery. But the spirit of their revolt nature that we saw that occurred with a lot of the Maccabees was on these people. So don't let nobody to tell you that when these captives came over here, they would just pacify people. No, there was over 250 American slave revolts. And guess what? They only tell you about 2 or 3 of them. It's over 200 of them. And one of the major ones is this history right here, the Gullah. Now, does anybody have family members, distant ancestors, or anything like that that may be connected to this information? There you go, 2 people here. But a lot of times they don't teach you this. And guess what? There's a connection to ancient Israel with these Temne people who are the Leoneans, who are connected to the Gullah Geechee peoples that arrived in Americas, escaped in Florida, fought back, scattered, and they're still settled there today. And what I would encourage you people to do is, if you can go and visit any one of these sites, go there and speak to one of those elders and hear about this rich history. But it should also encourage you at Hebrew Israelites that we are much more connected to what history is telling us than what they're really unveiling to us. And this is why we have to unplug for the system to get this unorthodox information to empower us today. Con? It shows that we have more connection with these West Africans than we realize. Con? All right, and with that, I want to say thank you for listening. Peace, shalom, and black power.